Let's get some insight on today's events on Capitol Hill from Ohio Congressman Jim Jordan, the ranking Republican on the House Oversight Committee. Thank you for being here, Congressman. I want to get your thoughts on today's hearing. What's your takeaway?
I think the first takeaway is Michael Cohen's delusional. He actually said in the hearing that Michael Cohen, is the one who launched the Trump presidential campaign because he started some website back in 2011. So again, I don't think you can trust anything he says. He actually disagreed with what the Southern District of New York prosecutors said when they said in their sentencing memo that he was wanting to get a job in the White House. He says, no, I didn't want a job in the White House. So when you're disagreeing with the prosecutors to a crime, the guys who you pled guilty to a crime, and saying you're the guy who launched the presidential campaign, I don't know that you can take much of what he says at any real value.
What about the specifics on the hush payments, as he called them, the 11 payments to him, the checks that he brought and set into the record? What was your take on that?
Well, first of all, remember, Brett, there was no new evidence here, because if there was any new evidence, the prosecutors wouldn't have allowed it to be heard in an open set. They would be part of an ongoing investigation. So there was nothing new here. And Michael Cohen can't have it every way he wants. On one hand, he said, it was my dream job. I was the president's personal lawyer. And then on the other hand, he says, but I wasn't getting any payments in the form of a retainer over the time period that I was actually his personal lawyer. So again, I don't think you can believe much of what this guy says. What I do think was going on today is I think this was the first step in the Democrats' crazy impeachment plans. Understand this, Brett. Last week, Tom Steyer, mega donor for the Democrats, was in Jerry Nadler's district organizing a town hall meeting to persuade Mr. Nadler to go ahead and move ahead with impeachment. 2 nights ago, Tom Steyer was in Baltimore, in Chairman Cummings' district, organizing a town hall encouraging his constituents to push Chairman Cummings to move ahead with impeachment. That's what this thing was about today, the crazy impeachment plans of the Democrats.
You know, former New Jersey Governor Chris Christie watched the hearing today, former Trump confidant, obviously. Here's what he had to say about the Republican questioning.
I think the interesting thing is that there hasn't been one Republican yet who's tried to defend the president on the substance. And I think that's something that should be concerning to the White House. Why are no Republicans standing up and defending the president on the substance? And that's either a failure of those Republicans on the Hill or a failure of the White House to have a unified strategy with them. They knew what was coming with Michael Cohen.
Your reaction to that?
Michael Cohen can't be trusted. The Democrats' first announced witness of this Congress is a guy who is going to prison, will be a federal inmate in 2 months for lying to Congress. So, I mean, come on, we did have actually members did defend and dig into some of the issues. I think in particular, Congressman Massey did, when he questioned Mr. Cohen about, if you made this payment and didn't even know whether it was legal or not, what kind of lawyer are you? So we did have some members dig into those issues, but the bottom line is, how can you trust anything this individual has to say?
When he repeatedly said that he could not talk about certain things because they are under investigation by the Southern District of New York, is that not a red flag to the Trump administration, to the president? We don't know what he's referring to, Brett. Maybe he's referring to the special counsel. We don't know what he's referring to. We don't know. We didn't get to get into some of these questions. We don't know what the Southern District of New York or the special counsel's office told him relative to what he couldn't and couldn't say in today's hearing. And remember, Mr. Cummings said the scope was so limited. Mr. Cummings said just things that he felt that members should be able to ask about. Frankly, I think they were designed to be things that only Mr. Cummings thought were going to be embarrassing to the president. So we don't know what that means. We'll have to just wait and see. All right. But what about the specifics? I mean, I understand all of your points about credibility. I understand all of the things about undermining his veracity. He is a flawed witness. But what about the substance? I mean, the president writing a check to him while president for these payments, these 11 payments that he says were to pay off Stormy Daniels and the other woman.
Brett,
is that not true?
Brett, Michael Cohen said he was the personal lawyer for the president. There was a retainer arrangement where he was paid these installments, these payments over the course of the time he was the personal lawyer for the president and the Trump organization. I don't think that's unusual. My guess is there's all kinds of companies, all kinds of individuals who have a similar type of relationship. That's what was brought out today. And again, where was the new news? There wasn't any new news here. And if there was any new evidence, no prosecutor would have allowed it to be heard today in an open hearing like this in Congress.
Well, there were some things that were under oath that perked some ears, because you had him saying he never went to Prague. He doesn't believe or hadn't heard of anything about Russia collusion. There are some things that Republicans would say, hey, we are on with that, but you said his credibility is shot, right?
Well, every once in a while you'll get some truth from some people. I mean, we saw it last week. Right, Andy McCabe's the guy who lied 3 times under oath and is under investigation. But he did say one thing in the last couple of weeks on his book tour. He's the third person who has told us Rod Rosenstein was serious about wearing a wire and invoking the 25th Amendment. When you're the third person I've heard it from, other people we've deposed, that's probably one thing in Andy McCabe's statements that's accurate. So maybe Michael Cohen did say a few things that were accurate. One of those, of course, was he's never been to Prague, which, again, the Democrats didn't want to focus on that because, remember, that goes right to the heart of all this. The dossier was the key. The Clinton campaign paid Perkins Coie, who hired Glenn Simpson, who hired the foreigner Christopher Steele, to put together the fake dossier which the FBI used to go get the warrant to spy on Trump's campaign. And then when that whole scheme fell apart because the American people elected Donald Trump president, then they come with this plan. The Lanny Davis choreographed hearing with Michael Cohen, their star witness, who is going to prison in 2 months for lying. That's what took place today in that hearing.
I have 2 more quick questions.
Sure.
One, you think that the president there's no fault here. He has nothing to worry about.
There was no new news. I think, as one of my colleagues said, no new news, but some fake news. So I don't think there's anything here. There's nothing
Second,
new.
Do you think the Democrats had a choice whether to hold this hearing today or wait until the president got back on U.S. soil?
Well, they should have waited. That's for sure. And frankly, they should have, I think, honored the request that Congressman Meadows and I had to the chairman, which is, why not bring Rod Rosenstein in? Rod Rosenstein is Deputy Attorney General, oversees the Southern District of New York, oversaw the special counsel until just a couple months ago. Rod Rosenstein, what we've heard in the last couple weeks, it would have been nice to have both of them sitting side by side so we could get the real story, the full story. That would have been nice, instead of a guy who's got a 30-minute opening statement, a guy who, again, is going to prison for lying to Congress.
Congressman, we appreciate your time. We'll follow all the developments.
Thanks.